Welcome to Come and See, your podcast for finding truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. With host and founder Richard Case and co-host and retreat leader Kathy Ricconi. Today is our special guest day, where we will hear from a friend of the ministry who will share their insight and stories on truth in this chaotic world. And now your host, Richard Case.
Well, good morning, everybody. This is Guest Thursday, and Kathy, I know that we have some very special guests that are actually neighbors of yours and friends of yours.
Yes.
Why don't you go ahead and introduce them?
Yeah, so I am so excited to have Diane and Antonio on here today. They'll tell you more about themselves, but Diane and I got connected. All the listeners on here have heard me talk about the beauty of the community of my Tuesday morning ladies group.
Yeah.
Diane is one of those ladies. And just an amazing warrior that I have been privileged to get to be friends with and do life with, and have gotten to know her husband now too, who, oh my goodness, you guys are going to adore him as you hear his story, and just, I'm sure some of his quirky humor will come out. We love you, Antonio. Anyway, great couple here, and we had the privilege of bringing them through to an Abide retreat just this past February. It was, right? So this February, and Diane has been faithfully listening to the podcast and just totally absorbing all the online courses too, and enjoying all of this. So I think everybody's going to enjoy just getting to know them. They have a great story and beautiful wisdom. When we had them at the retreat, it was like having a second leader couple there. So just amazing.
Great. Well, so this is Diane and Antonio Maiaquais. Is that it? How we pronounce it, right?
Maiaquais.
Maiaquais. Okay.
Maiaquais.
Maiaquais.
It's like Malachi, the equivalent of Malachi. Maiaquais.
Maiaquais. Is that what's that heritage? Is that Greek or?
It's Portuguese.
Okay. Great. And tell us where do you live right now?
We live in Exeter, New Hampshire, and it's like on the seacoast area.
Yeah.
Just about 10 minutes from me.
How long have you been living up there?
We have been living here for 5 years, and we moved here because of my job. I work with chocolate, and there's a big chocolate company here which I work for.
Oh, good. Yeah, we'll talk more about that. Well, first of all, we'd love to have the audience get to know each of you. So if you would, why don't you each share, how did you come to know Christ?
Go ahead, my dear.
Okay. Well, I was raised Catholic, and I'm grateful to my parents for taking my sisters and I to church from a very early age. And when I was about 13, I think it's around that age, in the Catholic Church, they have you go through what they call a sacrament of confirmation, which is actually where there is a praying on of the gifts of the Holy Spirit in the Catholic Church. And although some of my friends were giggling and fooling around, I do remember being very emotional and very tearful at that time, and feeling, more like I was confirming a relationship with Jesus, being old enough, to do that. However, I wasn't living the abundant life, through high school and college. But when I met my first and late husband in my 20s, he invited me and he was a Christian. He invited me to his church, and it was the first time that I had attended a church outside of a Catholic church. I'm not sure if I had thought I was going to get struck by lightning or what. If I did. And it's so interesting. If you are at all familiar with Pastor Jack Hayford and the Church on the Way in California, that was his church. So you can understand that's a far cry from the Catholic Mass that I was used to. And I remember when he invited us to just turn to each other, in groups of 3 or 4 and pray together, I was terrified because the only time I had prayed, in public was a recited prayer that I had memorized and, learned. But fortunately, time ran out in that few minutes before it was my turn. So I survived it, but I loved it and I wanted to learn more. And so as I attended a women's conference there, and I was 25 at the time, and one of the ladies asked how long I had been a Christian. We were just having a personal conversation. And, my response was that I was born a Christian, because it was my understanding that because I was born into the Catholic family, I was just, automatically a Christian. And she was super gracious with me, as were all the ladies. And I came to realize that I needed to accept the Lord as my Savior. And so that's how that came about. And then I've just been growing and learning ever since. And that's been about 35 years ago.
Yeah. And when you're in your teens or 20s then?
25.
Yeah, 25.
Yes.
Okay, great. Beautiful. How about you, Antonio?
My experience was, of course, very different, as many people have different experiences as well. But I was born in Brazil, and my parents, they got saved, and as they were professing their new faith, they and another group of people, they were kicked out of a small town because of their new faith. So we had to leave everything behind. So it was like grapes of wrath, We traveled to another city. My sister and I, we were on top of the truck, and he moved to the city and started growing in the presence of the Lord. And I was 8 years of age when I felt in my heart to give my life to Jesus. And then I became part of the Royal Rangers.
Royal Rangers. Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's a different term in Brazil, but I think it's the equivalent of the Rangers. And being part of that group of Christian boys, I went to Rio to watch Billy Graham in 1974,
Mm-hmm.
and he was preaching to 200,000 people. And I remember one thing that got into my heart, the calling. When God is calling you, don't shut your ears, don't turn your back. Listen to what God was calling.
Right.
I knew that where I needed to be, but I didn't have the understanding. So as I be going through my youth and being in church, I was still learning more about Jesus, and I got a much better understanding later on. But I had in my heart since I was much younger that I needed to give my life to Jesus. And then later on, I started developing more in the presence of the Lord. And it has been a continuous exercise since then.
Yeah. How did you come back and wind up in America?
I was working in a chocolate factory in Brazil. My career, I had been in the chocolate industry for my entire career. And there was a transition from one company to the other. And it was not the most positive one. And I decided to expand my career and come to the U.S. for a master's degree. And I only went back to visit my family. I decided to stay here. I understood it was my place to be, that God had called me to be here.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I tell my beautiful all the time that I grew up in a tropical country, very hot weather all year long. But I always dreamed in being a place with the 4 distinct seasons. I don't understand why. Today I understand much better.
Well, you in New Hampshire, you for sure get them.
Yes, we get it.
Yeah. Well, Kathy, our retreats, all retreats, we have chocolates. So we'll have to connect Linda with Antonio and see about ordering chocolates, because we do that at all our retreats. Well, that's fantastic.
Yeah, I'd say our small group benefits. It is not uncommon for Diane to come in like the Easter Bunny bearing yummies for all of us.
Yeah. So, okay, so you're in America, and Diane, you are as well. What happened that you met each other, and how did you decide to get married, and what led to that marriage?
Oh, I can start with this one because
Okay.
I was working in Philadelphia at that time, and I got to a point in my health that I was super stressed, and I didn't realize that. Like 3 years without vacation. I only found out after I went to the doctor, and he asked me, when was the last time we had vacations? Well, 3 years ago. And he has said, you have to take vacation immediately and get some rest, reboot. And I went to Florida to spend time with my sister and her family. And as we went to church, uh, where I was parked for a certain time. At that time, Diane was not there when I lived in Florida for a short period of time. I had some guitar students there. So that's where I met her at church on a Sunday.
On a 4th of July.
Ah, cool.
So I'll never forget that day to celebrate. Easy to remember.
What attracted you to her?
It was her like her kindness. It was like her gentle spirit, the way that she was talking to me, the way she was talking to others, like this great listener, which I learned that she's much more than a great listener. She's an awesome listener, and she really cares about what others are thinking and have to say, and that's how I got attracted to her.
Diane, do you want to share you guys meeting from your perspective?
Sure. So I had been widowed at probably about 6 months when I was at church on that Sunday, on that 4th of July, and I was doing well. I had an 11-year-old daughter and a 19-year-old son, and had been homeschooling, so I was very involved, with my children, women's ministries in the community, different things, and just I had been married 21 years, and just thought, oh, I'm okay. I'll probably never get married again, and I was okay with that. So never and certainly, just not on the lookout for that. And so my friend, which was Antonio's sister, at the church said, oh, I want to introduce you to my brother, just as a friendly thing, not trying to make a setup or anything. And I said, oh, okay, sure. And so many people were talking to him because he had been there before I was waiting. And then I said, wow, is he a movie star or something? There was a line to talk to him. And so anyway, I was getting ready to leave, and I said, oh, maybe I'll meet him another time, we're going to go. And she's like, okay. And then my son and I started heading for the door, and she said, oh, here he comes now. And so I said, okay. And we turned around, and as she introduced us and we went to shake hands and our eyes met, that was it for me. My heart jumped. It was like the Holy Spirit in him. And I remember even thinking like, oh, I hope no one saw that. Because it's in my situation with being a fairly new widow, there's all sorts of thoughts from all different directions. And so anyway, I sort of just pondered that in my heart for that moment and that day. And it just so happened that my son was dating his niece. And so they had invited us over that afternoon for a barbecue. And we went over to her house, which Antonio was there. And so we got to know each other a little bit then. And he was there for another week. So I think that...
You're so sweet. When she opened the door, I like to play with my nephews, like being silly. This grown man rolling on the floor. Yeah. She opens the door, and I'm rolling on the floor. I didn't feel much like a grown man, and she walked in and it was too great.
I loved it. And later that afternoon he gave his performance, the same one that you got to hear at the retreat, Kathy.
Oh my goodness.
Played, he imitates Louis Armstrong very well.
Oh, wow.
It's the funniest thing you have ever seen, Rich. He did it at the retreat for everybody. He plays, because he sings and does guitar too. And this imitation is worthy of video. It is amazing.
We'll have to capture that and put it on.
And I love to laugh, and so it was just a great afternoon. And because of my situation and my children, we had a long distance relationship for almost 2 years, with me in Florida and him in New Jersey. And at times it was difficult, but in hindsight, it was really from the Lord, because we talked a lot. We prayed together. We immediately got into the habit of praying together every morning and every night. And so, we were praying together every day and seeking the Lord about, timing for us to get married. So.
Wow. And how many years then did you total date before you got married?
It was about 2 years. I mean, I felt the same way, and 1 week later, I returned to my work, and I spoke with my best friend, and I said I met this lady, and she is the woman of my life. He goes, "Oh boy," and I'm gonna marry her. And he said, "Does she know yet?" She knows yet. And he goes, "Here we go." But that's how we felt at that time. And I was ready to make a move, but God led us on the direction of waiting, praying, growing first. And it was so important that she was in Florida and I was in Pennsylvania, because we were dependent on the phone, and we used that time to pray for each other. Even in moments that we didn't see that, the good outcome, we were praying for each other and proclaiming, that God will work through. He would provide a breakthrough, or keep our hearts on the right direction. And that was like the foundation of our relationship, was the daily prayer for each other.
Yeah. Wow. And so how many years now you've been married?
10 years and 10 months tomorrow.
Beautiful. All right.
We like to acknowledge and sort of celebrate every month on the 2nd of the month.
Yeah.
Our anniversary.
That's nice.
Sweet.
Sweet. So you did you move back to New Jersey then together after you got married?
Yes.
Okay. So you lived there and you were with your company there, and then you got a new job with this new company up in New Hampshire. What are you doing up there? What kind of company? You talk about chocolate company. What is it? What does it do?
Chocolate company. I direct quality. My expertise is in quality management, food safety, like food manufacturing, food science.
Yeah.
And I have been doing this for a very long time. And I got to work with a company that produced my favorite chocolate since the beginning of my career, which I'm very pleased and very happy. And I know that, God gave us this opportunity.
It was his dream job.
Wow.
Sweet.
Wow, beautiful. So that wasn't then that difficult to move up to New Hampshire with a dream job like that, right?
No, it wasn't. And we realized that Diane was actually born in New Hampshire. And
yeah, I was born in Keene, New Hampshire, but my family moved to Florida when I was 1.
Okay.
And although I'd lived a lot of different places around the country, I never once even thought about living in New England for whatever reason.
Sure.
So it's a bit of a full circle for me.
Yeah. So is your family still living? Do they come visit you in New Hampshire?
My family lives in Florida.
Okay.
And my sister has come to visit me here, but more often I go to visit them there.
Yeah.
It's a good excuse to go get warm and sit in the sunshine.
Yeah, particularly in the winter. Well, that's a great story. So it sounds like your chocolate company's doing well, and you're enjoying it. been your expertise, so it's kind of cool that God got you there. So how did the two of you get connected up with, learning abiding? What has that meant to you? And how each of you could share a little bit about what does that look like for you? The audience always loves to hear real stories of, well, how does that play out in this abiding aspect of it? So each of you could share a little bit about, how you came to know that, and then what has that meant to you?
Go ahead.
Okay. I believe that from way back when I was a new Christian, I was abiding, although I didn't put that term on it.
Right.
I journaled a lot. I have a stack of journals from back then, and I remember a particular subject that the Lord was working with me on for a while, and that was the power of the tongue.
Mm-hmm.
And how it's speaking. And so I remember looking up a lot of different verses on that, which of course there are many, and writing them down, and then just even journaling my prayers. And so that was as I learned more about abiding after meeting Kathy, as far as the retreats and talking more about that, and going even deeper with a concordance and looking up different references to go along with. I believe that I had a very good understanding of that already, because I had been practicing that for years, and just really spending time with the Lord. There were different times through the years, especially when I had little ones, where it looked very different. Maybe the amount of time that I was spending was shorter, or the time of day. I like to be consistent with a time and a place. But even now in my life, because I care for our 6-month-old granddaughter, it doesn't always work out exactly, as I would think it would in the timing, but I work it in each day. And it was very helpful for me with you all's encouragement of 15-20 minutes a day, because I can have a tendency to want to be there for an hour and a half, and of course when you lock that in your brain and you try to schedule that into your day, it's a little bit more difficult. Right. And there certainly are times when I have the opportunity, and I'm thankful for, when I can sit down and I begin writing and looking through the Bible and researching different scriptures, and I can be there for an hour and a half, and I love that. But I will say that I was healed of perfectionism years ago. I have those tendencies to want to do things a certain way, but I just have the freedom to say oh, that's okay. I have this 15-20 minutes now, and no, I didn't quite finish, but that's okay, because,
right.
I can still talk to the Lord about it throughout the day and get back on it again tomorrow. And so I really like that.
Yeah. Are you still a big journaler?
Yes.
Yeah. What does that look like for you? How do you journal, and what does that mean to you in terms of how that applies just to you personally?
Yeah. So I might write down a word or a theme that God is talking to me about. Most recently, it's been wisdom, which the Bible talks about comes from the fear of the Lord. So that topic, the fear of the Lord and wisdom, and there are a lot of scriptures, especially in Proverbs, on wisdom. And so I might fully write out 2 or 3, and then I will write a prayer to the Lord in my journaling, just saying, thank you, Lord, for the wisdom that you give me in this area. Or, what do you have to say, or give me wisdom about this area that's coming up in my life.
Yeah. Beautiful.
So that's an example, but I get very, very personal with the Lord. I'm having a conversation with him, but I'm writing it, and it kind of helps me stay focused on it as well.
Yeah, that's beautiful. How about you, Antonio? How does it look for you?
In terms of journaling?
Yeah, well, just in terms of abiding, and what does that mean in journaling, including journaling?
Okay. Since he's talking about journaling, I can talk a little bit about that as well, because when I met Diane, during that week, I had an experience with the Lord. God was refreshing. He was rebuilding something inside of me, and it was a very deep experience. And as I flew back, one of my best friends, she called me and said, you should buy a journal and start writing down the things that God does in your life.
Yeah.
And she didn't know Diane. Of course, Diane didn't know her. So I went to the dollar store, and I'm frugal, and I bought an inexpensive one. 2 days later, I received this beautiful journal in the mail sent from Diane.
Oh.
But just the connection that God put between my best Christian friend and Diane didn't know, and talk about journaling.
Yeah, yeah.
And I started writing down.
Major confirmation there.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, and I started capturing more. But honestly, I used to think that it was like, oh, the ladies, they do this.
Like a diary, you lock it with a key.
That's it.
Guys don't journal, but it's unto the Lord. And I started seeing like major things, and even things that God did in my life that I forgot. I would go back to the journal, and they were there, and I have been doing since in many experiences that even experiencing the word that God gives us, we understand maybe a year later.
Right.
Then we go back. Oh, we have this in the journal. We go back.
Right.
Goodness, we didn't understand a thing when we wrote this down, and now we're understanding because God's plan is beyond our time frame. His time is His time. It's not the microwave time that we have. And so this is on the journaling side, and there has been a blessing for us, and actually like a testimony for our children, because sometimes they come and they want to talk. Oh, by the way, I have something to journal here that God put in our hearts 5 months ago to pray for you, and then we can share with them, and it's a testimony for them because they know that God was working, and they didn't know. It's like I saw you under the fig tree, right? So that would be a testimony for our children as well.
Yeah, we it's a beautiful testimony of the beauty of God that we and Kathy and I talk about. He connects the dots, but we would like him, just tell me the answers. And he, like you said, a year later, he said, well, now you're ready for me to connect something. And had you not written it down and understood it, you couldn't remember going back to, well, oh, that's what that's about. And God has an infinite patience. So,
and I see that the journaling is a great tool for the exercise of abiding, because it takes you back. It connects you back to the Word, connects you back to what God is doing. So when we forget about something, that's that's one of the connections that we have. In terms of abiding, you asked if my name was Greek. So Portuguese comes from Greek and Latin.
Okay.
The Testament was written in Greek, and I think one of the first translation was Latin. So sometimes the English language has like a deeper meaning for something.
Yeah.
And sometimes the Portuguese one has like a deeper meaning. And for abiding, Portuguese means, the word you use is remain. So I hold on to that because that's how I grew up.
Yeah.
So remain, stay there. That's the way to receive the nutrients from the vine is to go back and not go back, stay there. And one of my most recent experiences happened like 2 days ago, because when I go through something, or we go through something, it's back to the Word, but it's a daily exercise. What does God have to say about this? And I went through something at work, and it was a very heavy audit, very risky one, and I was very tense. And I came back home, and my mood was different. I didn't want to talk, and I didn't go to the Word. The very next day, I just realized how silly I was, and I was talking to her, and I apologize for not being the best company the day before. And I think it was the Bible plan, right? And also a word that we received from a friend that went straight to the point. But the Holy Spirit had already touched my heart regarding if you had gone back to the Word, I would have told you something that put your heart back in the right place. But the next day I understood, and I felt the difference of the consequences of not abiding compared to abiding. You know, when things are good, abide. Not so good, abide, remain, because he will have something to say to us to keep us on track.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And it's it's always simple. He said, if I was you, it's better to abide. Well, thank you so much for sharing. Coming to the end of our first session, we'd love to hear more stories this next time about what you just talked about your connection with God. What is He saying to you, and how do you two come together and make decisions as you follow Him, and what does that look like to follow Him? So we're excited to hear more of your story. It's just always beautiful how God brings people together, and then He starts to join you into oneness, and we can see the joy that you guys have together. So it's quite exciting. So thank you for sharing. So Kathy will pick it up again next week and do session 2, and we will see you tomorrow for End Times Friday.
Sounds great. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone, and thank you especially Diane and Antonio. You guys can see why I adore them.
Yep.
Anyway, have a great afternoon. If you have questions, send them in at questions@afjministry.com, and we'll see you next time.
All right, we'll see you then.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Come and See, your podcast for truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. Send us your questions and comments, and tune in tomorrow for more answers to your personal questions about living life in God's truth. Remember, God's will is best and none better. His truth brings peace in this world of chaos.